Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Koralik from Figured Out Productions. The following video is a video of some kind, and I hope you enjoy it.
Hey guys, it's Adam here, and today, well, we're going to be talking about a whole bunch of Japanese pickups. Recently I had the opportunity to go to Japan for Tokyo Game Show, and while I was there, frankly, I thought I would need more time than I actually did. I ended up getting all my goals accomplished at the Tokyo Game Show within a day, so that left me a good chunk of time to go off and have some fun in Japan. I'm no stranger to Japan. This is like my 8th time there in the last couple of years. So what I do when I have that opportunity to be able to go out there and, explore is, to be honest with you, one thing I absolutely love doing is going around and picking up video games. Duh, you're on a video game channel, So, but for those who don't know, I've done a whole bunch of videos on this in the past. There's a whole bunch of great stores, obviously, in Japan to pick up cool stuff. And a lot of people, they instinctively say, oh, we should do is you go to Akihabara, we'll go to Super Potato and those other stores. No. I mean, those stores are cool if you want to go and just, look at stuff and have the spectacle, if you like the entertainment value of Akihabara. But the way I try to explain it to people is going to Akihabara is a little like going to Times Square in New York. Times Square has Starbucks. Times Square has an M&M store. Times Square has a Disney store. But you know what else has those places? Locations outside of Times Square that aren't nearly as expensive. They're just spectacle. Akihabara is kind of a very similar thing. You can go there, absolutely, and enjoy it, and you'll have fun. It's a lot of concentrated things in one spot. But it's a terrible place to go to actually buy video games if that's your objective. Now, I say that as someone who's been there obviously quite frequently within the last couple of years. So I have been to Akihabara and I've enjoyed the spectacle part. But you have to understand, if you're going to say, I'm going to go to Akihabara and buy video games, understand that you're just barely beating eBay prices. And that's why people like it. They're like, oh, it's so much cheaper than eBay. It's like, it is cheaper, yes, but so much cheaper than eBay? No. Where you really want to go, assuming your goal is to play video games or buy video games, is you want to go out into the rural parts of the country, or at least not the rural parts of the country, but further away from the Tokyo area, from the downtown area. The same would apply to Osaka. I've done that there as well. Go to harder spots to get to, quite frankly, and that's where stuff becomes cheaper. So the chain of stores I really like to go to are a chain of stores called Book Off and Hard Off. Now, everybody laughs at the name Hard Off for pretty obvious reasons, but it's funny because it's actually a series of stores in Japan. There's Book Off, which specializes in books, Hard Off, which specializes in hardware, but then there's other ones like Hobby Off, there's Off House, which kind of screws up the name pattern, then there's Garage Off, there's Mode Off, which I think that one sells lawn furniture and shit, and then the last one, which you rarely ever see, but is by far much funnier than Hard Off, is Liquor Off. Just saying. But anyway, so those stores are pretty great, and I love going to them as often as I possibly can. But as would be expected, like I said, I've done this a bunch of times, so you kind of get diminishing returns. But the one we're focusing mostly on here is Hard Off. Lesser extent Book Off, because I didn't go to that many of them. But Hard Off specifically is great because it's basically a thrift store that resells, obviously used video games as well as other forms of media and computers and electronics and all that stuff, but they'll have junk sections. And the junk sections will blow your mind because the junk sections are just full of things that we consider very rare and valuable and to be treasures, and to them it's just garbage. It's literal garbage. It's in a junk section. You can see bowls, just entire buckets of Super Famicoms for $1 a piece. It's insane. But now, like I said, I've been traveling to Japan so much, fortunately, that I've been able to pick up so much cool stuff that it's becoming kind of diminishing returns. There's only so many times you're going to find something you actually need and bring it back. I don't really do the whole duplicates thing. I don't go and be like, oh look, there's another one of those that I really need. I have it, but let me get this one and resell. I don't do reselling. So I don't really focus on that. So I got a bunch of stuff for myself, but I also, this time around, a bunch of stuff for my friends that were lucky enough to be awake at 3 or 4 a.m. when I was over there. I mean, it's 3 or 4 a.m. here. And then I'm picking them up stuff. I got one of my buddies got a Neo Geo AES that I found for $150. Another buddy got an Orange Spice GameCube with a Game Boy player. And then I think the dude who really won the whole thing was a buddy of mine named Martin. He was taking care of his kid in the middle of the night, so he's the only one around to chat. And I'm showing him stuff, and he's like, yes, that, I want that. And so here's what he ends up getting. A Super Famicom, 2 controllers, as well as a Famicom, and a loose cart of Wave Race 64, the Rumble edition, as well as a box copy of Super Mario 64, the Rumble Edition. For those who don't know, those two games got re-released in Japan with bug fixes as well as Rumble Pack support. All of that, everything you see in this picture, he got for a whopping $20. Just saying, hard off's pretty awesome. There's some pretty great deals that can be had there. So, that said, like I said, I picked up some stuff for myself. So we're going to go through it. There's a surprise off to the side of the screen, hence this awkward spacing over here. But yeah, let's just go ahead and dive in and I'll talk about it. But right, first thing up, we have a copy of Godzilla Trading Battle for the PS1. This was actually the first thing I picked up on this trip. So I'm not going to lie, when I was over there, I got this one at a book-off right outside the Machida station. I walked in there. It was the first thing I saw because I was heading to a very specific hard-off first, but this was literally on the walking distance on the way. And I walk inside and I'm just checking out the section there. And I'm just thumbing through the games. They didn't really have a whole lot in that one. But because usually the ones by the train stations aren't very good because they're usually picked clean by tourists, quite frankly. But in this case, they had this Godzilla game, and I had no idea there was a Godzilla game on the PS1. Now, I'm a huge Godzilla fan. I'm really looking forward to that Blu-ray set that's about to come out with like all the movies prior to Godzilla 1985 in one big Criterion set. It's going to be amazing. But the video games historically have kind of sucked for Godzilla, so I know this game is bad. It's a trading card game. It's immediately, I'm not interested in the actual gameplay, especially because it's Japanese only. I'm not going to be able to enjoy this. But the fact that it was a Godzilla game was enough for me to be like, I'm down, let's try it out, let's pick it up. So, yeah, I had to pick that up. So, Godzilla Trading Battle. I know that logic is stupid. I bought it more as the Godzilla fan than the video game fan. The next one I got, well, we're just going to stick with the PS1 for now, because I did a nice little stack of PS1 stuff here. This is not my usual MO. How I pick this one up is not usually, how I operate. But in this case, I was thumbing through the PS1 games at this store that I had spent a lot of time to get out to. So I really wanted to pick something up because I was actually kind of striking out. And as I was thumbing through, I saw this game and it just kind of caught my attention, kind of in that old school like way when you were a kid and you if you have this type of experience when you were a kid and you were back at Funko Land, before it became GameStop, before it became shit, and you were just you had a little bit of money and you had you could get one game. Even though that wasn't exactly the problem with me, I was just looking for a game. But I'm looking through and I'm just looking at cover art and being like, what do you think that adventure is about? What do you think that experience is? And I'm looking at it and going like, that actually looks kind of fascinating. Looking at the back, just trying to like piece it together. Then I remember we have these magical devices called phones, and I started looking up some information about it. And this game called Hermie Hopperhead, according to what I read, again I have not played it yet, was basically an attempt, I'm not going to say by Sony, although it does, I don't know if Sony themselves actually developed this game. I'm not seeing another developer around here, so it might have actually been them. Yeah, Sony Creative Products actually developed this. Was an alternative to a Sonic the Hedgehog game. It was kind of their attempt to make one without actually Sonic as a character. And looking at the back, once I read that, I was like, okay, I can kind of see that. It's got like the loops and everything. The first little boss there kind of looks like the boss in the very beginning, Eggman in Sonic 2. I was like, that might actually be something. And it's a cheap game. So I don't know if it's one of these games where it's like a hidden gem that nobody's ever heard of, or if a ton of people in the PlayStation community know all about this and I'm just an idiot for bringing it up this many years later. Either way, it looked really cool to me and it was cheap. It's that PlayStation Best Of edition, so it's like greatest hits. With PlayStation stuff, I'm not enough of a collector for it to care that much about the greatest hits thing, so in this case, just happy to have it. This one I got purely because it just surprised me. I was, again, looking through the PlayStation games, and then when I saw these two characters on the cover, I was like, what? And that would be Beavis and Butthead. They had, the name of this game is something like Beavis and Butthead in the Virtual World, or Do VR, or something like that. This game actually did come out in the West on PC, but in Japan it came out only on the PlayStation 1. Their PS1 version did not come out here. Now, how playable it is, I don't know. But, yeah, it was just like, surprised. There was a Beavis and Butthead game on the PlayStation 1, so just because I love those characters and I love that show, I just had to pick it up on that basis. Is it good? Probably not. Next up was one that I picked up because I've heard about it so many times. And it's a very elusive game to a lot of people. A lot of people say this is one you gotta have if you're an importer. Burger Burger. Now, this is a very expensive game. most of the time. In this case, the store I was in had this edition, which is the Greatest Hits edition, and then they had the regular edition. The regular edition was like $30 more and wasn't in good condition. And I know that's the rarer one, but I was like, I'd rather pay like the 15 bucks that this was and just go for it. So yeah, I got Burger. I know Burger 2 is more expensive and more rare and et cetera, and I've never seen that one, at least that I'm aware of. But yeah, this was cheap, and I thought, what the hell, let's take a gamble on it, because yeah, it's supposedly pretty good. So there you go, I got a bunch of cool PS1 stuff. Now, one of the objectives I've had for Japanese collecting, as I've mentioned in the past, but I'll refresh for those who don't know, is there are certain consoles where if I could, I'd like to get every game that came out in Japan for that console that we didn't get. So what that would mean, for example, is, say, the original Xbox. The original Xbox had 50 games in Japan, exclusively to Japan. They didn't come out in North America. They didn't come out in Europe. They just came out in Japan. I have all 50 of those. I've managed to get that goal accomplished. I did the same with the Dreamcast. Every Dreamcast game that came out in Japan that did not come out in North America, did not come out in Europe, I've got it. So there's some consoles where that's kind of a sub-goal, and I didn't intend for that to be the case most of the time, but it just kind of happened because of how cheap they usually are. Two of those consoles would be the Nintendo 64 and the Nintendo GameCube. Now, in all the hard-off/book-off pickup trips, if you've been watching those, you'll notice that like it starts off huge, like N64, just like crushing it. Because there's not nearly as many exclusives over there as you would expect, and especially in the case of N64, they're really cheap. GameCube games are cheap as well, but they're harder to come across. But I did manage to do it with the GameCube for the most part. So with the GameCube, I think I'm down to like 5 or 6 I still need. With the N64, I think it's only like 4 left. But what that means is I didn't really have any luck finding them. In fact, I only found one on either list, and that was this, which is a Naruto game. Naruto something 4. The first and second one came out here. The third and fourth only came out in Japan. I have the third one already. The fourth one is by far the most common of all the games on both of those lists. And I think the only reason I didn't have it is because I had simply missed it. I remember seeing it multiple times and just passing on it, assuming I already had it, because I just didn't, hiding in plain sight, basically, like I wasn't thinking about it. So now I have it, so it's off the list, but whatever, a couple of bucks, and I add one more to the GameCube list. Now, moving on, I got a couple of PlayStation 2 games. PlayStation 2 stuff, I don't really like to do much with the imports, only because there's way too many. There's way too many games on PlayStation 2. It's kind of like PS1 where I'm a little more selective. It has to be for oddball reasons. Either a game that like legit is good and we never got it, or it intrigues me for some other reason, because there's just too many damn titles. It's completely impractical. That, and it's also this PlayStation 2 specifically, very import unfriendly console. Like the same process you would have to use to play a legitimate import on legitimate hardware is the same process as you would have to do to play burned software. It's exactly the same. So it's not that rewarding to get an import, you know what I'm saying? But that being the case, I did pick up a couple of games. The first is a game called Rumblefish. This is a fighting game that we never got, made by Sega, actually. And it wasn't expensive. It was only a few bucks. So I was like, okay, I'll take a gamble on that. Now, I do have ways to play imports, as just described. But it would be nice to be able, like, I don't think I have a legit Japanese PS2, at least not one that works. I have, like, that PSX thing, but that thing doesn't actually work. But I'm working on another solution to all this, and we'll get back to that eventually. But either way, I did pick this up. And the other thing I got, as far as PlayStation 2 was concerned, was this. I had no idea this existed. This is the 2006 remake of Metal Slug, exclusively for PlayStation 2, and I think there was an arcade version. From the looks of the screenshots, this was a 3D remake with like chibi-looking versions of the characters. It's very silly looking. I don't know if it's any good. It probably isn't great, considering I've never really heard anything about it. I don't think we ever saw a sequel to this or anything like that. I don't think they continued in that direction at all. But still, it got made. This is the re-release version, much like I said, like Greatest Hits. Here's a little story for you. The last day that I had access to go to a hard-off, I went to one that I thought was going to be good because it was really in the middle of nowhere, and at least based on the maps. It was not easy to get to, etc., and I was like, this is probably going to be good. And I went there, and this is a gamble. It's always a gamble. I went in there. It turns out it was inside of a mall, like a highly foot-trafficked mall. So screwed up because there wasn't really much in there. So that was one of those situations where I spent like all day going to one and it did not really pay off. And that situation was, I have to get something just to get something, because if I don't, this was truly a wasted day. And this was the primary thing I got. Not that I didn't want this, but if I'm honest, I would have been willing to wait to find it if I had found something else that was interesting. But still, I got it, and I don't regret that choice, but it's like, I think under normal conditions, I probably wouldn't have picked it up yet. The other thing I got there, again, out of desperation, is I was digging through the junk bins, and I found this. It is a 3-pack of Game Boy game cartridges, or cases for original Game Boy cartridges, just to keep them protected. I didn't even take the sticker off this thing yet. It's still just 100 yen for the 3-pack, which is like around 92, 93 cents, something like that. So it's not much money, as I was making the point before. They put a little piece of tape on it because I said I didn't need a bag. Tape with this, which basically just tells them, hey, put some tape on it, I'm good. So I'm learning. I'm learning some Japanese. It's getting a little better, you know? But certainly nothing conversational. But anyway, so I got this. Good for that. Now, earlier in the trip, one of my high-level targets, like one of the things I knew specifically I wanted to find, and my buddy Switch helped me find this because he can read and speak Japanese, so he was able to find this more easily than I could, was a game called Sweet Home for the Famicom, right here. Now, if you don't know what this is, I wouldn't blame you. I didn't know what this was until a few months ago, actually. So here's the little backstory on this game, because I'm sure a lot of you already do know. One can argue that this is actually debatably the first Resident Evil game. I would say that's probably most Resident Evil fans would disagree with that assessment, and I probably would agree that they should disagree. I would not count this as the first Resident Evil game, but that said, there is a reason people say that. First, it was made by Capcom, so that gives it some legitimacy. But secondly, what it actually is a survival horror game that takes place in a mansion, where you basically have to do the same basic plot of Resident Evil. What Resident Evil 1 started out as was a remake of this game, and eventually became its own thing in its own series. So one can argue this is like a really early, I'm not going to call it a prototype because it is its own standalone game, but it can almost feel like a prototype of the franchise. I have no idea if there's fan translations of this game online. This is a very Japanese dialogue-intensive game, so it's not really playable for me anyway, but it's still a cool thing to have. The name of the game, again, is called Sweet Home, and you can look it up if you have any interest in it. But just as the Resident Evil fan in me just kind of wanted to have it just to have it. So there you go. Now, I managed to pick up some games for some other consoles that I don't usually pick stuff up for. But the first up was sadly a disappointment, which I will explain in a minute. This is a game called Bulk Slash for the Sega Saturn. Now, this is a rather expensive game. If you look online, it is not a cheap one. And I was just like, wow, because they weren't charging much for this game. I think it was like 20 bucks. And that's really cheap considering the game's complete. You know, I was like, even for like a hard off, that ain't much money for this game. So I just grabbed it. And then I was just, oh, hey, I got away with one. I got a good deal, right? That's what I thought. So this thing was wrapped in plastic and everything. I didn't touch it until I got back here and I was kind of unloading everything. I take the plastic off and I just open up the case and everything seems fine. Disc is fine, nothing there. And I go to remove the manual. And then I realize I can't. And then I look at the front and I realize why. After kind of picking at it, I realized there's some sort of like adhesive or something. I don't know if somebody spilled soda underneath or what, but the manual is stuck to the plastic. And if I try to remove it, it will rip the paper. So that's a huge fuck. Like, I mean, I got a good deal on it, I guess. In hindsight, I have to say if I had known that, I would have passed on it. And it might have even said it, but if it said it in Japanese and I didn't notice. So again, it's an expensive game, so financially speaking, I did fine with it. Just the collector in me is just kind of irked, but it is what it is. So am I going to rebuy it? No, but it's cool to have anyway. So Bulk Slash. Next up is a game that I am definitely ashamed to have bought, but I knew if I did not buy it, I would regret it. For those who have ever watched, when I was still working on Game Society Pimps, if you guys ever watched that channel, one of our earliest videos was a video I had an idea for this game that's called the Yakuken Special for the Sega Saturn. It's a paper, scissors, rock, or rock, paper, scissors, however you prefer to say it, game where you play against the computer. And when you win, there's these girls, like FMV clips of these girls, and they'll like dance and stuff, and you're playing against them. And then when you win, they take off an article of clothing, and then the process continues, really, until you either win by seeing them completely naked, or you lose and the game's over. Like, that's the whole premise of the game. Now, upon doing that video back in the day, I found out, of course, there was a Saturn version, because that's what I had, but I also found out that there was a 3DO version as well as a PS1 version. Now, I didn't see a PS1 version, but much to my surprise, in one of these stores, I found the damn 3DO version. This has to be the worst cover art I have ever seen on a video game. I don't even, like, if I didn't know already what this game was, I truly would not know what the hell I was looking at in this. It's just like a random, like, girl's chest, and then, like, some sort of, like, 90s looking computer bot type of thing. What fascinated me the most, though, aside from knowing what the game already was the fact that this is the only game I have ever seen in my life that actually used the AO rating, adult only. Now, I've heard of this rating ever since I was a kid, but I have never seen it on anything, ever. Now, of course, this is actually a Japanese release, so that makes it's even less exciting, I guess. But it was still strange to see. So, yeah, just for the history that I have with this game, for making a video on it and all that stuff, and just knowing what it is, it's just like, nope, gotta get that. That's just too bizarre to pass up on. So, that and it's the first time I bought a 3DO game in, like, ever. You know, like, I never pick up games for the 3DO. So, there you go. Next up, I got a Dreamcast release, which is very rare for me because first world problems, I have all the Dreamcast releases, you know, shed a tear. So when I get to go over to Japan, I am always looking for like oddball demo discs or something like that because that's really my only shot at finding a new game, basically. In this case, I actually found one. This is one for Sentimental Graffiti 2, Miyuki Hosaka. Now, Sentimental Graffiti 2 is a game on the Dreamcast, and all I know really about it is that there was a series of demo discs that went along with it, where each character in the game had some sort of demo disc about them. And this is specifically for Miyuki Hosaka. Is it playable? Is it interesting? No, not to me, but it's a Dreamcast demo disc that I didn't have, so I was happy to pick up something new for the Dreamcast. That was just kind of nice to be able to pick up an actual GD-ROM for it. But speaking of Dreamcast, there was other things I got here. One of the stores I went to, I found this. This is a Millennium 2000 pink controller. Now, in Japan, at the time of the Millennium, the Dreamcast was still quite relevant. And one of the things Sega of Japan did was that they released a whole bunch of these Millennium Edition colored controllers. Now, I've had this, there's a black one. I've had that one for years. I remember buying that, funny enough, I bought that in Anchorage, Alaska when I was 13. And I still have it. But I don't think I ever picked up any other of these Millennium controllers. And I don't even know how many of them there actually were. I know there was obviously the pink one, the black one. I think there was like a blue one, probably a green one. Like in the US, we got like 4. They didn't say Millennium on them though. We had the red, the yellow, the green, and the blue. Transparent, and we had matching VMUs, and that was it. But Japan got crazier with the colors, as Japan does. So they also did it nicer because their controller plugs also matched the color of the controller, which I think is a nice touch because ours didn't do that. But yeah, so cool to have that, just to add to the Dreamcast collection. Oh, but I did so much better on the controller front. So I went to this one hard-off, which I swear I had to be the first gaijin, or tourist, foreigner, whatever, more foreigner, that had ever been in there before. Because there was way too much good stuff in there for it not to have been picked clean by if other gaijin had been in there. Because frankly, guys like me go in and just buy all the cool shit and leave. Whereas locals don't really do that. So I went into this one store and they had so much cool stuff, like the Neo Geo AES that my buddy picked up and all that. But as I'm going through it, I'm looking and I'm seeing some controllers for the Dreamcast, and then I'm just like, I see something special. First I see this. This is the Camo edition Sega Dreamcast controller, like military camouflage controller. And then they also had the leopard print one. Now, these controllers are very uncommon. My understanding, these were not sold at retail, unlike the Millennium 2000 controller, which was. These controllers could only be awarded basically through a point system of Sega Direct. Now, what was explained to me was that basically back in the day, if you picked up a Dreamcast game, it would come with a little like code number on it, much like Club Nintendo, if you guys remember that. You would redeem it on their website, it would add up points, you could use the points to redeem stuff, they'd mail you stuff. That was the only way to get these two controllers. These controllers, from what I've seen online, very expensive. I remember talking to Steven Robinson, the guy who runs Dreamcast Hub, while I was over there and showing him photos of this, and he was just like, oh my God, how much did you pay for those? It was like hundreds upon hundreds of dollars. His initial thought process was that I paid like $350 for the two of them together. And I was like, no, go way cheaper. He's like, all right, I'm thinking maybe $100 each. So 200 together? I'm like, no, there was like 20 bucks each. Like over there, they're not valuable. If you can find them. That's the hard part, is finding them. So once I found them, I only paid like 20 bucks each, and I was happy to do it. They're super rare, super expensive controllers, and just to find them was a thrill. So add that to the Dreamcast collection. Obviously, I love collecting for the Dreamcast. It's not very often I get to do that. And to pick up some of these like really strange, rare editions of the controllers is just so cool to me. So I know I have one. I have one that's like a marble rock type of face. So now I have 3, which is great. So moving on though, I did get some more games. One of the consoles that I've been trying to get a lot of games for is the Neo Geo CD, because I have a nice love relationship with that console from Japan. One of the times I was in Japan, I got my first Neo Geo CD, which was the front loader. I found that in a junk bin at Super Potato. And I know what I said about Super Potato before, but that time they really came through for me, because it was just a junk bin with a front-loading super fucking Neo Geo CD in it. Couldn't believe it. Bought it for $18. $18. It was mine. I brought it back. It worked perfectly. There was nothing wrong with it. Still have it. And so I had the console. Wonderful. I didn't have a power supply. Later I got the power supply. Found out it worked totally fine. And then later, I was one of the last trips I was on. I found I think it was in Osaka somewhere. I found a boxed Neo Geo CD top loader for like 75 or 100 bucks, something like that. Bought it, brought it back. So then I had all the necessary cables. I had all the necessary controllers. Like I had everything for both consoles. I was totally good to go. But I knew about this, and I knew to collect games. There was a time early on when I would go to Japan, like the first couple of trips, where I would go into these stores and you would see Saturn, just Dreamcast, PS1, and Neo Geo CD. It would just be so common. Sadly, since I've started collecting Neo Geo CD, it's become Saturn, Dreamcast, PS1, maybe one Neo Geo CD game. Like it's all PS1 stuff for the most part, which is kind of depressing, because it's like the time I was ready to get Neo Geo CD, it's gone. It also depresses me for the future. If I ever decide to collect Saturn, like that era might be closed, unfortunately. Thankfully, I'm done with Dreamcast, but whatever. Long story short here, not really short because it was pretty long, I'm looking for Neo Geo CD stuff. So while I've amassed a bunch of it over these trips, this trip I did manage to track down a couple of games, just a couple. The first was King of Fighters 94, which means I now have every King of Fighters game on the Neo Geo CD, which is very, very cool. Awesome. And then the next two, there's a little bit of a tragedy too, but we'll get back to that in a second. The first of those two is Fighters History Dynamite, as well as Real Bout 2, The Newcomers. Both are less common Neo Geo CD games. I'm not going to say expensive, but less common. I believe of the two, the Fighters History Dynamite would be the rarer of the two. But yeah, it's just more cool Neo Geo CD stuff. But whereas King of Fighters 94 is kind of a 300 yen type of game, which is about 250. But still, cool to have. Now, at that same store where I got these two games, I believe it's also where I got these two controllers and so on, I also found a true oddity. A true, whoa. I wasn't expecting to see that. Actually, passed on it multiple times within the store before reevaluating that section and finally it hitting my face, realizing what it was. You ready? If you guys don't remember, I'm going to refresh your memory. One of the last trips I did to Japan on one of these videos is I went to a hard off and my buddy Fox was with me, and he managed to find some just strange items. He found like a PC Engine CD with the console, like in that like briefcase type of thing. He found it in the PC section in the junk bin. PC Engine. Like 45 bucks or whatever it was. And he also found a boxed Bandai Playdia. Complete, perfect condition, like nothing wrong with it. We even think it was like a demo unit because it had some special sticker on it, so we were just kind of like, it was clearly like never used. And it was just sitting there in like the toy section or something. So we bought it, or I bought it, I should say, because he said he didn't want it. He said I could get it. It was like $45, $40, something like that. I got it, but I never found a damn game for it, because Bandai Playdia games, you do not see them. I saw one, and I didn't know what to do, other than to pick it up. I don't even know the name of this damn thing. I'll put it in the subtitles there. I don't even know what this is called. It's some Bandai Playdia game. It is the only one I've ever seen, ever. Now here's where the tragedy comes in. So the store I bought this in, you must understand a little backstory here. If you go to Japan and you have interest in buying things like this, there's a great feature that Japan has, which is called tax-free shopping, which is just what it sounds like. If you're a tourist, you don't have to pay sales tax, which is pretty good because sales tax is 8%, and it's actually about to go up to 10% over there. So you can get out of it in a lot of cases. All you have to do is look for this logo, which I'll put up on the screen here. If you see that logo in the store somewhere, it means that store is willing to not charge you tax. There is a couple catches to this. One, you have to spend over 5,000 yen in that transaction, which is about $48 or so. So when you're doing video game stuff, that's really not that hard. You can kind of accumulate that pretty quickly. Let's keep it real. So keep that in mind. Secondly, there's two versions of how they do this. Sometimes they'll do all the work in front, and then they'll just charge you the final total without the tax. And then there's other situations where they'll charge you the final total with tax, but then give you the tax back in cash, which would be Japanese yen. Either one is fine with me. So, you know, whatever suits you. You don't usually have a choice in that discussion, but that's how they'll do it. So, the store I was at, when I did this, when I got this stuff, like I said, I think I was like the only gaijin who had ever been in there, because they were so perplexed, A, to see me, and B, it was just all the stuff in there that I just couldn't believe was there. Because the other stores I'd been to, I was kind of disappointed in, because it was very clear that a lot of tourists had been in there. But in this store, not so much. So when I go up to the counter and I see the tax-free sign, there's only one in this store. Usually they kind of plaster it so that it's pretty easy to notice. In this case, it was like a small one right behind the counter. It was just there. And so he does the whole ring up. I'm not bothering him about it until he's done. And then I just kind of point at the thing and I say tax-free. And he just kind of looks and he's just like confused for a second. And then I'm like, I point at the sign again and he looks over and he's like, oh, chotamate kudasai, which just means like 1 moment please. And he goes around the back and he starts talking to this other dude, and they're talking for a while. Then he comes back out together and sumimasen, chotamate kudasai. Sorry, just 1 second please. And I was like, hi, wakarimashita, I understand. It's all good. You know? And I'm sitting there waiting, and then they bring out this giant book and they're thumbing through it. Basically, they had no idea how to do this. They knew it was a thing, but like never has anyone come in and done it before. So they're sitting there like reading all the rules about it. I felt so bad because I was like, they hate my guts. I can tell they hate me because they have to go through all this shit they don't want to do. No one's ever made it do it before. They don't know the process. So I felt bad, but it's like, you know, I mean, this was the same store where I got the controllers. My buddy got the, you know, the Neo Geo AES. It's like, we're talking about a lot of money here at that point. It ended up being like a $35 savings or something like that. So it was like, you know, you gotta do it. So as I'm waiting for him to do that, he eventually gets through the whole process, and we're done, and I leave. Now, what's a tragedy about this is in all this paperwork and all this item shuffling and all this stuff, I neglected to notice that he didn't put the discs in to this game, or sadly, this game. Yeah, that was a heartbreaker. So I didn't realize that until I got back here. I'm going through the games, opening everything up, and then I find out, I'm like, oh no. Now, thankfully, my phone knew exactly where I was. It told me, it was like, you know, you were on this store on that day. So I was like, oh, awesome. So I just found the store again, and then I gave that information to a friend of mine. I was like, look, can you do me a solid? Can you call up this store, explain the situation? I still had the original wrappings on the game, so they still had the actual like disc number for the employee to look at, to find in like a drawer. So I gave him all that information, and he was like, I think you're going to need a receipt. And I'm like, I don't have that. Just give it a shot, see what happens. Calls him up, long story short, they find the disc, and they're like, oh shit, we're sorry, our bad. So they're going to mail my friend the discs. Yes, the discs will still be in Japan, but at least they'll be in my friend's possession. So next time I go there, if I get to go there anytime soon, I can grab them, or I could just have them shipped here, whatever. Either way, The discs are safe. I just don't have them at the moment. So there you go. Happy ending, sort of. Now, moving on. We have a very zany item. So you ever looking around for stuff and there's some things on your list and you just keep going like, I hope I find one. I hope I find one. And you just don't really think about it as far as like other random shit that might come up. Let me put this in an example here. One of the things I kept looking for, and I've been looking for on all these trips, is Apple Pippin games. The Apple Pippin was Apple's only console. I don't like Apple, but I'm fascinated by the fact that they made a console. It really only had even moderate success in Japan. I mean, really low. Like more than the Pladia, but not by much. And so that console, I was like, man, I want to pick one of those up, and I want to get games for it. Got the console years ago. On one of my earlier trips to Japan, I found my first ever game for it. It was the Gundam game. And then one of the last times I was out there, I found this racing game called Racing Days. And I was like, yes, awesome, I got a couple of games, I'm good. And I just have to keep it up. So I went to the same store in which my buddy found the Bandai Pladia. And in which I decided, okay, I'm going to look around here. And I found that rare CD game case, like when they know what stuff is. I look in there, and there's a Pippin game. And I'm like, oh shit, a Pippin game, yes! The fucking Gundam game. The same one I already had. And I was like, you gotta be shitting me! Okay, fine. I found a Pippin game, again, finally. It happens to be one of the two I already have. Bad luck. Okay. Later that day, I go to a second Hard Off. Now, this second Hard Off is the one where I actually found the second Apple Pippin game. I found Racing Days in this store. So I was going into it with this vibe of like, this is going to be good. This is where I found a Pippin game. Somebody in this area had a Pippin at one point. I know it, so maybe I'll find another one. And my buddy, the one who was going to hold on to these discs for me, he was like, you want to do anything? Let's go hang out and we'll meet up. And we went to the store together. And I was like, it's great because he speaks Japanese, he reads Japanese, and we can communicate with stuff. We can ask about things, much more helpful. So he goes, and we're looking around at stuff, just looking. And eventually we find it's the rare CD case again. And in the rare CD case is a Pippin game. And I'm like, oh, we did it! It's another Pippin game! Oh my god! Same fucking Gundam game. Here's another photo of it. Yep, it's me flicking it off because I was so mad that somehow, in the same day, I found two Apple Pippin games. Two! And both of them were the same game, and both games I already owned. So I was like, butthurt about that, to be honest with you. So the reason I tell you that story is like, I was looking so hard for this type of stuff, but I didn't come across like the thing I was ultimately wanting, but I did come across some other rare oddities. And one of them was this controller. Anybody know what this is? Anyone? I'll give you a second. You can totally write it up right before I actually say what it is. No? Okay. This is an FM Towns Marty controller, specifically the Fujitsu edition, the one that doesn't actually say FM Towns Marty on it. Now, what is this and why did I buy it? Well, here's the thing. FM Towns Marty is a console I've been looking for forever over there, and I have never seen any like hint of its existence. Like, I've never seen the console other than I had a friend named Bob who lives down in St. Louis who actually owns one. Other than that, I've never seen it. I've never seen one in Japan, not even like Super Potato, which is basically going into a museum. I've never seen it. And I've never seen a game for it, nothing. So I went into this one store and just, in one of the bins, just the controller. Now I bought it immediately because I was like, look, if I ever find the console, you know, it's a safe bet it's not going to have a controller. Or if it does, it's not going to have a second one. So I don't know. I just wanted to grab this controller. Like, it's evidence that the console ever existed, you know? So that was one of those things where it's on my radar, but I wasn't thinking about it. Whereas Apple Pippin games was totally on my radar. I could find them, sort of, and couldn't really find them. So that sucked. But at that same store where I found the second Apple Pippin game, and I'm sitting there with Switch, and we're looking around at, like, they always have this little section that's full of the oddball stuff, the stuff they don't know what to do with. Because every console will be represented, you know, all the major ones will have whole sections. And then when they get down to, like, consoles that only have a few games, like, oh, here's our 3DO stuff, and here's our, you know, whatever stuff. I always look there, because it's always like, if there's going to be anything odd, it's going to be there. And I did find something really odd. I found this. It's a game, a boxed game for the Casio Loopy. Anybody even heard of this console? Now, I had heard of it before, but never in my life had I seen one. I've never played one. I had no experience with the console whatsoever. I think I mentioned it once in one of my recap videos for the 5th gen, like early on, like, hey, here's all the consoles in it, but I don't have a Loopy, you know, something along those lines. Like, I think that's really all I said. So when Switch was with me, he was like, oh, wow, cool. You know, he was like excited for me because I like found this thing that's so odd. And to me, I was like super excited about it. Now, is it good? No. It's just some dumb little game. But I was super excited the same way I would have been for a Pippin game. It's like, oh, cool, I found games, you know, for this really rare console. Except in this case, don't own the console. So I found a game for a console I don't own. I bought a controller for a console I don't own. But yeah, but the story doesn't end there. So I bought this damn Loopy game. And I thought, okay, now if I ever find the console, I'm set. I got a game for it. Now, what are the odds of that? Pretty good. As it turns out, pretty good. Because the next day, I went to that was the one where I went to get this controller, the AES, some of the other stuff, these two games here. I went in there, and what did they have? They had a Casio Loopy. Never seen one before in my life. And there it was the next day. I was like, holy shit, that's insane. So I picked it up. It wasn't even that expensive. You know, I mean, considered what it goes for on eBay. I was just like, wow, that's so neat. That's just like everything coming together. I'm so happy about that. Eventually I'll do like a video on it specifically, you know, like a recap video. We can mesh in there with the 5th gen. But the little elevator pitch of this console is, the thing that people remember and I say remember because I don't think people really remember it. The thing that people remember about this console is that it was the only console in video game history to be marketed and targeted specifically to girls. That's not usually how it goes. Consoles have, I mean, look, it would be sexist to say that video games are for men, because that's not what I believe. That's not true. But video games historically have been more marketed and leaned towards guys. It's just the truth. Now, women have always been welcome to play video games. I completely agree with that position. But there was never really a console that said, like, no girls allowed. But in general, the ads always kind of aimed more towards boys. They just did. And this was an exception. This console specifically was like, no. This console is not for young boys. This console is for young girls. And one of the big weird features of this console was it has a built-in sticker printer. So like you eject this top part, and inside there's, I'm not kidding, this is a little printer cartridge thing that has stickers in there. And all the games, what they do is they have like little like artistic sections. They try to lead you to a section where you look at pictures and stuff and draw your own art. And then you can print off little stickers of the things you saw or the things you drew, and all the games are kind of that way. And ultimately, there were only 10 games on this console before it was canceled. So not a particularly successful machine, but I was like, oh, cool, I found the console, and I have this boxed game. That's awesome. And oh, look, it actually comes with another game. What game does it? Oh, it's the same game I already own. What the hell are the odds that finding the exact same game? It's like, well, I guess it's debatably 1 in 10. But who knows? Maybe this game was a pack-in with the console. I don't know. You know, if only we had a boxed one and we could tell. If we had seen another one, maybe that would come up. I just, you know, it's just, who owns a boxed Loopy? It's just, you know, nobody does. Except for a guy who maybe the day after he got this went out to another store, like hypothetically speaking, went out to another store and was just walking around a junk section of that store, looking at crazy stuff. He sees like, oh man, the junk section, by the way, the junk section at Heart Off is like basically a graveyard. It's you get all this insane, cheap stuff right before they destroy it, which is sad. They do that. And maybe that guy, he saw a boxed steel battalion for like $50 and just was like, just couldn't believe all the crap he's seeing. And then as he's leaving, he just notices something. Something strange. Something he was unfamiliar with, and yet suddenly hauntingly familiar with. It might just have been... You know what? I actually have footage of this event. It might just have been a boxed Casio Loopy in the store. The day after I had seen another Casio Loopy, which I had already bought, which was the day after I bought a Casio Loopy game, which was the first time I'd seen anything Casio Loopy related. Has anybody talked as much about the Casio Loopy in the last decade, if not 20 years? Probably not. But there it is, a boxed Casio Loopy with 3 games. And so I needed to get footage of it. I needed the world to see that this is what this thing looked like, you know? Just to show, like, I don't think that game was packed in with it. I mean, it doesn't seem to indicate that anywhere on the box in the footage. I don't really know. But yeah, man, so it was kind of hilarious because I looked at the back of it and it had 3 games in it. And one of them actually was the same damn game again. So were I to have picked it up, I would have 2 Casio Loopies as well as 3 copies of this game. But who would be that stupid? Who would buy a second Casio Loopy the day after they bought a Casio Loopy in the first place, which is already a stupid thing to do? Yeah, this guy. This guy is stupid enough to have done that. Yeah. I own a boxed Casio Loopy, everybody. And there's a picture of that dumb game on the back. And there's actually this other one that I have. I don't know what the hell this one is. It has pictures of just some of these games. And on the front, picture of the console. Just, why did I do this? But yeah, so I have a boxed Casio Loopy sitting here. It also came, like I said, with a couple of extra games. We have another copy of that same game. We also have another one, which I don't know the name of. I'll put the name on the screen, but second game. And then a third one, which has some girls, and they're in Paris, obviously. The Eiffel Tower is there. I'm sad to say that I actually did sit down and try to play these. And when I was trying to play these, they're like I described. Like, they're aimed, you have to understand, these are aimed at little girls. Little Japanese girls. So the games are not even playable in English, like, at all. Like, and they're kind of text intensive, surprisingly. Because there's no platforming elements. They're not really games. They're like artistic expression. So the whole idea is have a dumb little story, and it gives you a cutesy little way of like, let's take the dog to the park, and then we see the park. And then you're supposed to be like, oh, let's take photos of the park. What do you do with those photos? You print them off on the console. And every single game is like that. They're not really games. And I tried playing, I now own 30%. 30% of the Casio Loopy gameplay library. Why? Because I'm an idiot. Though, to be fair, like, I would obviously not have bought the loose boxed one if I hadn't, if I knew I was going to run into a boxed one the next day. But a friend of mine's kind of bailing me out here because I basically said, look, man, you're into oddball consoles. I'm into oddball consoles. I will sell you the Casio Loopy plus, the copy of the game that it came with for the amount I paid for it if you're willing to take it. And he accepted that deal. So I'm going to get my money back on this one. And then all is fine. I got a good deal on a Casio Loopy as if that's a thing. And he got a good deal on a Casio Loopy as if that's a thing. And everybody wins. Mostly you win, because you get to mock me for these stupid decisions. But still, whatever. I got a Casio Loopy in the box. Alright, I know it's dumb, but whatever, I've got it. Because one might argue, like, why don't you keep it? Like, have a second one. Like, what the hell am I going to do with a second Casio? What am I going to do with one Casio Loopy? It's not even a situation where I can go, like, well, maybe I want to save it so I have 2 controllers. It's like, it has 1 controller port. It's not even a 2-player game on the console. There's just really no reason. They both work perfectly. They're all totally fine. Games all work. There's just no reason. I guess you could debate that I could keep both so that I have extra sticker printer cartridges. No, because I'm never going to print anything. I don't even know if those printers work, to be honest with you. The console part works. I know that. But the printer sticker thing, don't know, don't care. But it'll be nice to be able to actually make a video about this thing eventually and put it in the retrospective there. I think you guys will probably enjoy that. Tell me. I assume you will, but that's, if I'm honest, guys, that's why I got it, was so that I could make that video eventually. Because I'm not going to sit down and play Casio Loopy and be like, this is my Friday. No, that shit ain't going to happen. But it's just an oddball console to me, and it's a lot of fun to just... I have a soft spot for oddball consoles. I think they're a lot of fun because they always have such an interesting story, and they're so, like, bizarre that they ever got made, and it's so fascinating to think, like, somebody thought this was a good idea. Because the other thing is, I say this as a YouTuber, I'm so tired of how many, like, hey guys, this is the PS1, and we're going to review it. It's like, how many times do we need to hear that console's story? It's like the endless Spider-Man reboots. But you know, the FM Towns Marty, the Casio Loopy, the Bandai Palladium. Terrible consoles, but let's talk about how they got made, because that's fascinating to me. I'm not saying they're better than the PlayStation, because that would be objectively wrong, but they're more interesting because they haven't been told or discussed nearly as much, and that to me is interesting. So there you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed this. If you're ever interested in going to Japan, I've been talking about this for a while. There's been people asking me, like, can you make a video with tips and suggestions for traveling to Japan? Because a lot of people are intimidated by the concept, and I've considered it. It just, I don't know if that's something still people would want. We could talk about it, but yeah, let me know if something like that would be interesting to you. Let me know if you guys are interested in seeing a video on the Casio Loopy. Thank you guys very much for watching. Please, if you can, like, comment, subscribe, and all that great stuff. I really do appreciate it. Please follow me on all the social stuff, the Patreon, all that great stuff's in the comments section below, or the description below. Thank you very much. I'll see you all later.